father and a son get into a car accident. The father dies. The son is taken to the operating room, and the surgeon looks at the boy and says, "I can't operate on this child because he's my son." How is this possible? Now, if this is the first time you're hearing this riddle and you feel completely perplexed, you're not alone. A large majority of individuals deem this riddle impossible to answer. Only a minuscule amount of people respond with something along the lines of, "Well, the surgeon must be the boy's gay second father," and even less respond with, "The surgeon is the boy's mother." What does this say about our gender biases? Today, I would like to help you confront some of your gender biases, after which I want to try to capture the current definition of gender, followed by an effort to pursue a new paradigm. Before I leave, I want to help you determine the growth you want when it comes to understanding gender. So, let's confront some of those biases, shall we? Society has a long list of roles and expectations based on gender, one of which is the assumption that men are more competent than women, especially when it comes to performing complex tasks, hence the riddle. But assuming something, even believing something, doesn't make it true. And all of these expectations are introduced at a young age without anyone even taking notice. Allow me to help you unpack some of your possible biases. Only sweet little girls can play with Barbies. Rough boys should play with trucks. Only boys can have short hair. Girls must have lengthy locks. Had an ultrasound and found out it's a boy? Celebrate by painting the room blue. Want your baby girl to look fancy for that outing? The frillier the dress, the better. Heck, when it comes to clothing, women weren't even allowed to wear pants on the Senate floor until 1993. And as far as word choice goes, I still hear people using terms like fireman, policeman, garbage man, mailman, even snowman, instead of firefighter, police officer, garbage collector, mail deliverer, snow person. I even catch myself doing it from time to time. And all of these generalizations can be incredibly powerful. So powerful, in fact, that you don't even notice how much they affect your daily perception of reality. But I guarantee, if you take a step back for a moment and you analyze, let's say, the top 4 closest individuals to you, maybe a parent, a spouse, a neighbor, a friend, yourself, or even your child, you'll notice that none of them fully fit into these gender stereotypes or boxes society has created. Perhaps your father likes to cook, or your girlfriend prefers not to wear makeup. I know men who are stay-at-home dads and women who are strong, aggressive, bold bodybuilders. And all of that is due to the fact that gender as we know it, gender in reality, isn't exclusively one thing or another, but rather all-encompassing. Now, I'm not saying we need to throw out the old school ideas of gender, those labels of male and female, but what I am saying is I think we can all agree we need a much more flexible viewpoint, a more realistic definition of what gender actually means. However, before we discuss what gender is, I think it's important that we first talk about what gender is not. Being a trans parent, which means that I am the parent of a child who's often referred to as transgender, or in our house, as we like to say, gender creative, I have noticed that much of society does not differentiate between biological sex, sexuality, and gender. Before I realized I was a trans parent, I didn't differentiate either. So let me help you out. Biological sex refers to the body parts you're born with. Sexuality refers to who you are attracted to. And gender is about your sense of who you are. It's what your brain tells you to present as. People often confuse biological sex with gender, thinking that the body parts you have determine your gender, but that's not always the case. People also often confuse gender with sexuality. I get that it can be confusing. So put simply, and this is the best way I've heard it put, gender is who you go to bed as, sexuality is who you go to bed with. So, gender. Let's try to capture the current definition. What does that word mean? It may help to think of it as existing on a spectrum, like anything else in life. Eye color, blue, brown, and everything in between. Hair color, skin color, height, weight, number of freckles. Only this spectrum has male on one end and female on the other. Now, some of the individuals you know that were born male aren't always on that end of the spectrum, but are rather sort of gender fluid, dancing along the line of gender based upon which traits or abilities they've been given in life or which behavioral characteristics they choose to display. Likewise, some of the individuals you know that were born female aren't always on that end of the spectrum, but tend to veer closer to the male end of things from time to time. Think of it like this. If male expectations were depicted by the color black and female expectations were depicted by the color white, there would be a whole lot of gray on that spectrum. In fact, I can't think of any one individual I know personally that I would label as either all male or all female. Each of us seems to be a mix of both. Now, since language is continually growing and developing and changing over time, words are not stagnant like many people believe them to be, and since change is the only constant, the definition that I want to propose of gender isn't a spectrum at all, for that straight line suggests the idea that things are flat, one-dimensional, and depicting it that way limits our ability to express reality for the substance of what it truly is. I want to define gender in a two- and even three-dimensional way, and this is where we're going to attempt to pursue a new paradigm. Picture this: a string of horizontal lines depicting the physical aspects of gender, offset by a string of vertical lines depicting the mental, emotional aspects of gender. We'll put clothing here, hairstyle here, voice here, weight here, height here. The list can go on and on. You can add as many as you need to. Down here we'll put things like level of self-confidence, ability to be patient, level of empathy, level of competitiveness, etc., etc. If you had to place yourself into this, we'll call it a cube of commotion, what would it look like? Let me give you an example. Suppose you're more of a t-shirt and jeans type of person. You have shorter-ish hair, a bit of a deeper voice. We'll put weight here, height here, level of self-confidence, patience, empathy, competitiveness. All right, so looking at that, would you consider that individual to be male or female? That's me. What if I told you that what American society tends to deem as masculine traits are found in the upper left-hand corner, and what American society tends to deem as feminine traits are found in the lower right? What are you then if you end up in the upper right or the lower left? I think this is why society is attempting to develop new words for things. It's not because these things didn't exist before, they've always been there, it's just that we didn't have words we used to describe them with. Now suppose you weren't in any one given corner per se, but you're kind of equally spread among them all. How would you identify then? Or suppose you're born in a different country, France, Africa, Australia, where the expectations are different. Or suppose instead of you plotting your own points, somebody else does it for you. Somebody who knows you well, somebody who knows you not so well. There's just one more twist I want to add to all of this. Since we took it to a level of 3 dimensions, I feel it's only appropriate we attempt to take it to a level of 4 dimensions, which, according to Albert Einstein, means we have to add movement over time. I'm going to describe it as a tesseract of chaos. We're going to attempt to pursue a new paradigm, So, for example, let's say you get a haircut, or you experience something so incredibly profound that your ability to be empathetic completely changes. It's amazing how the points can change. What if you could compare your 5-year-old self to your 10-year-old self to your 20-year-old self to who you've become now? Mind blow, right? I mean, it's like a mixture of nature versus nurture, only instead of it being a competition, it's a growing, living, moving, developing, ongoing interconnection. I mean, science and spirituality combined. Watch this. 5, 10, 20, now. That is what I feel is the most current, realistic definition of gender. And the reason why I feel it's so incredibly important to share this with other people is because being a trans parent, I have lived through the horrors of what happens when people view it in a one-dimensional way. It's limiting, it's restrictive, and it provides no room for growth. I think in order to understand gender properly, and in order to implement that understanding into our everyday lives, there are 4 things we can do. First and foremost, we must confront our gender biases, which, let's be honest, it's an uncomfortable process. It entails admitting that we have gender biases, trying to figure out how, when, where, and why we use them, and being less defensive when other people point them out to us. I have a whole slew of gender biases I'm still fighting against. In fact, I'm going to go out of my way to ask other people to kindly point them out to me so I can grow at a more rapid rate. Secondly, it involves you accessing your current definition of gender and changing it to match that of reality. I mean, when you look around in everyday life, what do you see? Let's be realistic. Accept reality. Acceptance leads to mutual respect and eventually to a deeper understanding. I have accepted my children, both of them, all four of them, regardless, no matter what, provided they're not hurting themselves or anyone else, which means I have also accepted my gender-creative child. For me, it has always been a non-issue. A lot of other trans parents that I talk to say that they went through this mourning process when their gender-creative child transitioned. They felt like it was the death of one child and the birth of another. I can't speak to that. I have no idea what that feels like. My children are my children, have always been my children, will always be my children. When I look at people, I'm body blind. I don't see bodies. I see souls. Thirdly, we must attempt to pursue a new paradigm. We must learn to see gender in all of its complexity. And then we must allow life to be whatever it is, realizing that we have control over ourselves, but not over others. Allowing things means that you understand it's not your choice to make or interfere with other people's daily decisions. I have allowed my gender-creative child to socially transition, which means she has grown her hair out, she has changed her name, not legally, and she wears clothing that society would deem to be more feminine, even though she was born with male body parts. None of which is permanent, all of which is reversible. The big question now is if I will allow my child to physically, medically transition in order to fit in with society's expectations of what normal is. Newsflash, there is no such thing. Before the age of 18, the age at which society deems all of a sudden overnight she can make all adult decisions for herself. Will I allow her to physically, medically transition? I don't know. We'll take it as it comes. But I can say that being a bit more of a naturalist, I would like to see my child grow without needing physical medical intervention. All the doctor appointments and hormone shots and possible gender reassignment surgery, I really don't see the need for any of this if society would change their perspective to match that of reality. You see, the more I studied this intently, the more I realized that society likes to place this in a medical category. They think it's a medical issue. I don't see it that way at all. I see this as a social, cultural, emotional issue. My child shouldn't have to physically, medically transition in order to fit in. Society should change their viewpoint to match that of reality and consequently accept my child for who they truly are. Which leads us to the last thing you can do. Determine the growth you want when it comes to understanding gender by being an advocate. There are little ways you can advocate. Standing up for individuals when you see them being treated unfairly. There's big ways you can advocate. Join a protest. Advocation is the most important key to the entire process. It's the reason I'm up here today. Advocation saves lives. And if you can't be an advocate for whatever reason, if you just can't bring yourself to do it, the next time you see a tall individual who's 6'4", donning long hair, wearing a dress, and is asking to be called Greta in a deep voice, smile and walk on by. Maybe even say hi. There really is nothing strange about it. For gender isn't what we deem it to be, it is who we are. Live and let live.